I think for a lot of us, we would begin with knowledge. And that may not be what you wrote on your paper, just because we're different. But I think, in general, we would begin with, here's what you need to know. Here's what you as the church needs to know. Here's what those outside of the church, those who don't have any relationship with God, don't know Jesus from an apple, this is what they need to know. I think that we would begin with knowledge. Because there is a model that we as the church have adopted from the 500 years of enlightenment where knowledge was king. We basically migrated that into the church and said, the more that you know about God, information equals transformation. The more we know about God, the more our lives will be changed. And information is extremely important, and I love the learning process. I have begun to enjoy the classroom much more than I ever did when I was actually in the classroom. Anybody resonate with that? I enjoy the process of learning and understanding more and more about this world that I live in, the life that I have, my personality stuff, just the way that I process things. I enjoy that a great deal. I think that we have, to a certain degree, fallen in love with knowledge. Gnosis is what it is in Greek, that we would have a knowledge of God. Knowledge is extremely important. Matters a great deal. But if that becomes the primary focal point of our relationship with God, this is what I know about Jesus. This is what I understand about the universe. This is what I know about God. If that becomes the primary point of our research, of our investigation into God, into relationship with God, we are missing a big portion of it. Knowledge matters, but I'm not sure that it needs to be at the top of the list. I'm not sure. This is a little bit more from Gordon MacDonald's article. He says, perhaps we could use the time to go over the matter of what it really means to live in pursuit of the Christ-like character, a topic that was a favorite of Paul, who we're looking at today. So he says, he posits, maybe we would spend time talking about what it means to follow Christ and have a Christ-like character. He goes on to write, while the doors are closed, we might ask if the present way of doing church life really works. Does the generally accepted of the way we do what we do, does that generate courage, wisdom, solidarity in such a way that its people really learn how to carry the servant spirit of Jesus into our schools, into our businesses, into our neighborhoods? So another possibility that he kind of puts forth is that maybe we would have a discussion of maybe the way that we do it and the way that we gather and the things that happen on our gathering times, whether they be Sunday mornings or Saturday evenings or other times. Maybe we would talk about whether or not we really think that is working. And then he says something more. Perhaps a closed-door session might provide an opportunity for us to ask ourselves if we are really caring about and speaking into the most important things that challenge our world and society. Is it possible, to borrow a word picture from D.L. Moody, who is a great writer and a part of the foundation of the Protestant church, is it possible that we too often are haggling amongst ourselves about what kind of carpet we use, the style of music we engage for worship, what is or is not in the bulletin, and whether and where to hang pictures all around us while the building is burning? That's a mouthful. But what he is basically saying is there, are we concerned about parochial things that don't really have an eternal significance, or are we more concerned about the people who are not yet here? I'm not sure how I answer that question yet. Because I think it's almost like a teeter-totter, that it swings one way one time and the balance is shifted another time. I think it's important that we care about and we reach out to those that are in the church. Obviously, that's important to you as well. You have been a part of projects to help those inside the church. What about those outside the church that have no relationship with God at all? What do they hear us talk about? I think this is a very interesting and maybe even a very difficult question. What do they hear us as church folk talking about? Paul starts with love. So what if we, as the church, really started to show love? I wonder if some of the criticism would stop. You know, the church has been lampooned as a hypocritical institution. We talk about one thing on Sunday morning, and we live something different on Monday through Friday and Saturday. And sometimes that's not fair. And sometimes it is. What do you talk about when you leave this place? When you make reference to this church, this family of God? How do you talk about the place that has built-in love and that should be a part of it. Because I think sometimes we are more interested in fixing people than we are in loving them. And the truth be told, it is not our job to fix people. It is our job to love them. Jesus is the one that fixes them, not us. And for some of us, that is a difficult thing to land. Because our relationship with God, again, it's about knowledge for us a lot of the time. We become a God encyclopedia. And we have all of the answers for every question that someone would try and throw at us. And every doubt that they have about this God, we have the ability to answer. And Jesus, more often than not, engages people in relationship. He doesn't try to offer answers. And for the record, I think this is very interesting. When people do ask for a straightforward answer, Jesus gives the kind of answer that we would never think about giving. I'll give you an example. The rich young ruler comes to Jesus and he says, how do I get to the kingdom of heaven? How do I get to heaven? That has really become kind of a mark of the church. How do we get into heaven? And Jesus says, well, you need to love your father and mother and honor them. And he hits a number of the 10 Commandments. And the guy says, I've done all that. And Jesus, instead of challenging him, said, you've done all of that? You've not sinned at all? You've not disrespected parents or taken or stolen or coveted? You've not done any of that stuff? Jesus doesn't ask that question. I think that's a question I would probably be willing to ask. You're doing all this stuff. Jesus doesn't do that. He says, you want to get into the kingdom of heaven? This is the answer that I don't think we as the church have ever really given. Sell your stuff. Sell all your stuff and give it to the poor. Why does Jesus say that? Is getting into heaven, is a relationship with God, about the works that we do? I think it's part of it. That answer of giving all of your stuff and giving it away was crucial to that rich young businessman. He is probably, I think the reason Jesus says this to him is because this guy has his stuff at the top of the list. And Jesus says, unless I make it to the top of your list, you and I are not going to have anything very meaningful. So maybe you need to sell your stuff. And again, I think that sometimes we get caught in giving the answers to questions that no one is asking, when in fact Jesus is only asking us to love one another. I think that's why Paul begins with love. But too many times we are talking aloud about non-eternal things that divide us, sending a message of separatism, elitism, and a general lack of love. Now, it's pretty easy to excuse ourselves from the conversation. Say, well, that's not me. That can't be us here at Edgewood. That can't be the way we are acting. But I would say instead of putting up the walls and say, well, that's not me, I don't have to address any of that, let's just ask ourselves, are we living out, not are you acting separatist, are you acting elitist? Because I don't think that's a fair question. I don't even know that's a question that we can honestly answer. A better question is, are you showing love to the people all around you? It is easy to love the people